Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually we're looking at something incredibly broad on this show. A major historical shift, a breakthrough in artificial intelligence, maybe a complex geopolitical situation.
Right, the big picture stuff.
Exactly. But today, we are zooming all the way in. We are going microscopic. We are dedicating this entire deep dive to just one man.
And what a singular, incredibly complicated human being he is.
We're referring to him as Mr. M. And honestly, looking at the massive stack of research we have on the table today.
It's a literal mountain of paper.
Really is. We've got psychological profiles, actual transcripts of his workplace outbursts, and notes from someone who's being called a shadow observer. Reading through it all, I feel like we're profiling a character from a novel. Like if you told me this guy was the anti-hero in some gritty, premium cable drama about corporate Japan, I would absolutely believe you.
It does feel cinematic, doesn't it? But Mr. M is very real. He is a 52-year-old employee at a Japanese company. And to the people he works with, he is, well, let's just say intimidating is the understatement of the century.
Intimidating. Yeah, let's just look at the quotes on the very first page of the dossier here. He has been heard telling underperforming managers directly to their faces, quote, "If you can't do the job, you should just die."
Yeah, that is a very heavy opener.
Or, how about, "We don't need you," or, "I didn't come here to make friends." I mean, this guy is walking around the office like a loaded weapon.
Yeah.
He is literally known among his colleagues as a destroyer. But then
you turn the page of the dossier.
right, suddenly we aren't looking at a monster at all. We are looking at a guy who goes home to his wife, whom he affectionately calls Pharaoh, by the way.
Which is just a fantastic detail.
I love it. And he treats her like an absolute queen. He eats the bento box she makes for him every single day, sometimes with actual tears in his eyes. He is a beloved community leader.
Yep.
He literally bows to the telephone when he's talking to people.
And that is the hook for today, isn't it? That incredible paradox. How can one single man be an absolute demon in the conference room and a saint in his living room? It's the classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde setup, but it's playing out under the fluorescent lights of a modern, sterile office building.
Exactly. And that is our mission today. We aren't just here to gossip about a grumpy coworker. We're trying to completely unpack the life philosophy of Mr. M. We want to understand his way of life, his remarks, his human relationships. Because the more I read this material, the more I realize this isn't just about some guy needing anger management classes.
No, not at all.
This is a highly calculated survival strategy.
It really is. It is a very specific, intensely constructed way of navigating a world that he fundamentally feels is broken. We have so much ground to cover today. We've got his origin story involving a deeply traumatic company bankruptcy, his absolute obsession with historical warlords, and this totally fascinating psychological state called the teen grip.
Let's start right there with the destroyer persona, the face he shows the public at work. The psychological profile in our sources identifies him as an ENFJ on the Myers-Briggs scale. Now, I dabble a bit in MBTI. And ENFJ is usually known as the protagonist, right?
That's right.
They're the charismatic leader, the mentor, the person who naturally rallies the troops with deep empathy.
Precisely. I mean, the archetypal ENFJ is someone like Oprah. It is the coach who believes in you when nobody else does. Their primary cognitive function is extroverted feeling. They basically live to create harmony and connect with people on an emotional level.
So how on earth do we get from Oprah to, hey, you should just die? Because that seems like a pretty significant malfunction in his personality.
Well, it's not a malfunction at all. It is actually a defensive transformation. The source material highlights a very specific psychological state called the T grip. T stands for introverted thinking. Now, for an ENFJ, this is their inferior function.
Inferior meaning what exactly?
Yeah, it means it's the tool buried deep, deep down in the basement of their subconscious. It's a tool they rarely ever use under normal circumstances. Normally, an ENFJ solves a problem by asking, how is this going to affect the group's feelings?
Right, maintaining that harmony.
Exactly. But if you put an ENFJ in an environment of extreme, prolonged stress specifically, an environment where leadership is totally incompetent, where crucial decisions just aren't being made, and where that prized harmony is actually just a mask for laziness and avoiding conflict,
what happens?
their primary empathy circuit basically burns out, it overheats from the friction of the incompetence, and it entirely shuts down.
And when the empathy shuts down?
The basement door flies open, the tie grip takes over completely, the person flips into a state of totally cold, hypercritical logic, they stop caring about human emotion entirely, and they become utterly obsessed with the logical consistency of the system they are in.
So it is almost like a raw survival mode, like The people around me are failing me, so I am going to rely solely on pure, unfeeling logic to get through this.
That is exactly it. And because this is their inferior function, they don't wield it gracefully. It's not refined. It comes out crude, blunt, and verbally violent. To Mr. M, when he is locked in this state, incompetence isn't just, oops, I made a little mistake.
What is it to him?
It is a moral failing. It is a literal sin against logic and sincerity.
Wow. Okay, that perfectly explains the sheer intensity of his outbursts. When he says, if a manager can't make decisions, take responsibility, or move people, they aren't needed. He's not just trying to be mean for the sake of it. He is stating what he sees as an undeniable logical fact.
Right. A manager's function within the system is to decide. If they don't decide, they are a broken, useless part.
Let's talk about that really controversial quote, though, the "you should just die" comment, because that sounds horrific to our modern ears. I mean, human resources would have an absolute field day with that today.
Oh, he'd be fired instantly in most places. But you have to understand it through the lens of the tie grip. When Mr. M says that, he isn't wishing for the person's actual biological death. He is viewing the company as a living organism or a complex machine.
Okay, decode that analogy for me.
Think about human biology. If a cell in your body stops functioning properly and it just starts consuming precious resources without contributing anything to the organism, what does the body naturally do?
It kills the cell off.
Apoptosis, exactly. The body purges it to save the whole. Mr. M is acting as the corporate immune system in these moments. He is looking at these managers and saying, functionally, you are dead weight. For this system to survive, you must be removed. It is system purge language. It is not homicide language.
It is just brutal, uncompromising efficiency. It really reminds me of a computer program forcefully deleting a corrupted file so the hard drive doesn't crash.
That is exactly how he processes it in that moment. And this intense obsession with efficiency bleeds into absolutely everything he does at work. Let's look at how he runs his meetings. The Observer notes specifically mention that he keeps them strictly to 15 minutes.
Which, if you've ever worked in a traditional corporate setting, is basically a speed run.
Yeah.
I have personally been in meetings where it takes 15 minutes just to get the projector turned on and get through the, hey, how was your weekend, small talk.
Oh, absolutely. And Mr. M fiercely hates that. The dossier contrasts his 15-minute, totally results-oriented meetings with the standard management meetings at his company, which apparently drag on for 2 entire hours with absolutely zero conclusions reached.
2 hours of just talking in circles.
To him, those 2 hours are a literal crime. You are stealing time. And since time is the raw material of human life, you are essentially killing the company and its employees by wasting it.
There's a very specific cultural element at play here, too, isn't there? The note specifically mentioned his deep hatred for something called santaku.
Yes, santaku. It is a massive concept in Japanese business culture, and really Japanese society in general. It translates roughly to surmising or reading the air.
Reading the air. So
Yeah.
trying to figure out the unspoken vibe.
Essentially, yes. It means proactively guessing what your boss or your client wants without them ever actually having to say it out loud. It is all about being incredibly subtle, saving face for everyone involved, and anticipating needs before they are articulated.
So if you're in a meeting and the boss slightly frowns at your proposal, you just politely withdraw it, even if he didn't actually say the word no.
Exactly. You surmised his displeasure. It is this very complex, high-context game of emotional four-dimensional chess. And Mr. M, he just violently flips the chessboard over. He completely refuses to play it.
He has that incredible quote in the file. I didn't come here to make friends. I came to produce results.
He demands absolute clarity. He is basically saying, tell me exactly what to do and I will do it. Do not make me guess your feelings. By totally rejecting santaku, he purposely makes himself a pariah. Because he's withholding the social lubricant that keeps the typical office polite and friction-free, he is actively choosing hard truth over comfortable politeness.
I do have to play devil's advocate for a second here, though. Is he actually effective when he acts like this? Or is he just being a massive pain in the neck who alienates everyone? Because there's this really telling anecdote in the notes about the tiger's authority.
Yes. Someone tries to get him to expedite a project by using a classic corporate pressure tactic. They tell him, hey, this request is super important because it comes directly from a top executive.
And this is where you really see his true allegiance shine through. Because instead of folding, he just snaps right back and says, don't bring up names.
Right. He says, I do my best for every single client. Don't use authority to make me work. The customer is the only reason I do this.
That is the exact moment I fully fell in love with this character study. Because most people in a rigid corporate hierarchy operate almost entirely on the fear of the boss. You hear the CEO wants something and you drop everything to look good. But Mr. M operates on a totally different frequency. He serves the work itself. He serves the client. The CEO's fancy title means absolutely nothing to him if the core request isn't logical.
It is almost a Ronin mentality, the masterless samurai. He has a very strict internal code of honor, but he essentially serves no lord within the corporate structure.
But that begs a massive psychological question. Where does a guy like this actually come from? You don't just wake up on a random Tuesday morning and decide to become a masterless samurai who tells middle managers to undergo apoptosis. This kind of heavy psychological armor is forged in some serious fire.
It absolutely is. And that leads us perfectly into the origin story. We have to look at his past to understand his present. And diving into segment 2 of our research here, it seems the ultimate defining moment of his life was, well, a sudden bankruptcy.
A sudden company bankruptcy when he was in his 20s. This seems to be the core trauma that informs his entire worldview today. Walk us through what happened there.
So imagine you are a young man. You have a decent job. You think your life is on a stable, predictable track. You wake up, you commute to the office one morning, totally ready to work, and when you get there, the doors are locked. The company is just gone, bankrupt overnight.
That is genuinely terrifying. It is like the floor completely dropping out from under your entire reality.
It was. He describes the very specific, lingering pain of that time as not being able to eat what he wanted. The sheer, terrifying financial destitution of losing his livelihood with zero warning. That single experience completely rewired his brain.
How so?
He realized in his bones that a company is never a permanent, safe shelter. It is a highly fragile construct that can totally collapse at any given second if it's mismanaged.
So when he looks around his current office and sees inefficiency, when he watches managers wasting hours in pointless meetings, he isn't just getting annoyed like a normal employee would. He's actually being deeply triggered.
Exactly. He's looking at the dam and seeing the structural cracks because he knows exactly what happens when that dam finally breaks. He intimately knows the starvation and panic that follows. So his extreme workplace aggression is fundamentally a radical form of disaster prevention.
The dossier says he actively prepares for 100 times the normal workload. He spent his own time learning programming, VBA, complex automation. Not because he's just some tech nerd who loves coding, but because he feels he desperately needs to be bulletproof.
He automates absolutely everything he touches so that if disaster strikes, he can single-handedly manage the workload of 10 people. It is a pure trauma response survival mechanism. He never, ever wants to feel that utter helplessness from his 20s again.
There was a really telling detail in the notes about his daily interactions with his colleagues that highlights this perfectly. When his coworkers are just joking around, engaging in that dark gallows humor people often use in stressful jobs, saying things like, haha, what if we go bust tomorrow?
He immediately shuts it down. He doesn't laugh. He intentionally creates this incredibly dark, heavy atmosphere in the room and just says, it's not a joke.
Because for him, it's not some abstract, funny hypothetical. He has lived the actual nightmare.
To him, those joking colleagues are basically passengers standing on the deck of the Titanic making cute little jokes about ice cubes while the ship is barreling straight toward the iceberg. He doesn't want to laugh with them. He wants to grab them by the shoulders and aggressively shake them awake.
But it's not just blind fear and trauma driving him, is it? There is a very distinct warrior spirit mixed in there, too. He wasn't just a passive victim of that bankruptcy. The notes mention his background as a kendo captain.
Yes, this is the other massive pillar of his core personality, the martial arts background. He was a kendo captain in middle school and high school, and kendo isn't just about hitting your opponent with a bamboo sword. It is deeply rooted in the concept of ji.
Ji meaning righteousness or honor, right?
Correct. The notes actually describe him during his school years as a bully breaker.
A bully breaker. That creates such a vivid, intense image.
It does. Picture the quiet kid who suddenly explodes with this terrifying, quote, I'll kill you energy the second he sees a bully picking on someone weaker than them.
Wow.
But, and this is a really crucial nuance to understand his current behavior, he didn't just punish the bullies. He also severely punished the student leaders and the captains who stood by and let the bullying happen.
Oh, that is fascinating. So his anger wasn't just, I hate this specific bully. It was, I deeply resent the teacher or the squad captain who is failing to do their actual job to maintain justice here.
Exactly. His philosophy is that if you hold any position of authority and you passively allow injustice or incompetence to occur on your watch, you are deeply guilty. You are complicit.
And that is the direct straight line to his behavior in the corporate office today. The middle managers are the failed leaders who are currently allowing the company to rot, so he takes it upon himself to violently punish them.
But remember, he is not just a one-dimensional punisher. Back in school, after dealing with the bullies, he would go and buy snacks for the junior students using his own pocket money.
Ah, the benevolence of the true samurai. You destroy the wicked, but you fiercely protect and nurture the innocent.
Precisely. And he carries that exact same dynamic into his corporate life today. He will ruthlessly scream at the managers who fail, but as we are going to see a bit later, he has this incredibly soft, protective spot for the young beginners who are just trying their best.
This unique cocktail of financial trauma and strict samurai code seems to have led him to develop some very specific historical obsessions. I want to shift into segment 3 of our notes here and talk about his historical heroes, because the figures he idolizes are, well, they're pretty intense.
This segment is where we really get inside his head. The Shadow Observer noted that Mr. M completely idolizes Usugi Kenshin.
Usugi Kenshin, often referred to as the god of war from Japan's Sengoku period.
Right. And Kenshin is historically famous because he largely didn't fight for typical warlord reasons. He didn't fight to conquer territory or hoard profit. He fought almost exclusively for that concept of due righteousness. If a neighboring warlord was acting like a tyrant, Kenshin would literally march his army out, completely crush the tyrant in battle, and then just turn around and go home without claiming a single inch of the conquered land.
Which, objectively speaking, is a completely terrible business strategy.
Oh, it's a disastrous business strategy. But it is absolute perfection for the soul. And Mr. M deeply sees himself reflected in that mirror. He is fighting these endless, exhausting office battles, not because he's trying to get promoted. He fully knows he's never getting promoted with his abrasive attitude, but simply because it is the right thing to do. He is desperately trying to enforce moral order inside a completely chaotic, failing system.
And he also strongly identifies with Sanada Yukimura, right? The legendary warrior who led a famously doomed charge against the massive Tokugawa camp.
Yes, Sanada is the ultimate historical underdog. The berserker spirit fighting a guaranteed losing battle against totally overwhelming odds. Mr. M knows his company is a structural mess. He knows that the entrenched system, the Tokugawa in this metaphor, is ultimately going to win and probably crush him. But he chooses to fight anyway. He explicitly identifies with the Western Army at the Battle of Sekigahara.
The Western Army, which is famously the side that lost that battle.
Exactly. He deeply sympathizes with the losers.
Why? Why side with the losers if you're so obsessed with efficiency and results? Does he think they had the moral high ground?
Yes. He fundamentally believes the Western Army fought out of genuine loyalty and principle, while the victorious Eastern Army only won through calculated betrayal, switching sides, and cold pragmatism. For Mr. M, he would vastly prefer to lose a battle while keeping his honor intact, rather than win a battle by selling out his core principles.
This brings us to his wildly contrarian take on the romance of the Three Kingdoms, which I have found to be one of the most fascinating parts of this entire dossier, because it totally goes against the cultural grain. Usually when people talk about the Three Kingdoms, almost everyone naturally loves the Shu Kingdom.
Right. Shu is traditionally framed as the protagonist faction. Liu Bei, the highly virtuous, benevolent leader, his fiercely loyal sworn brothers, they are universally presented as the good guys of the epic.
They're the ultimate plucky underdogs. We are culturally conditioned by the stories and the video games to root for them. But Mr. M, he absolutely despises the Shu Kingdom.
He hates them.
How is that even possible? How can you hate the designated good guys of the story?
Because Mr. M looks at the Shu Kingdom and what he sees isn't virtue. He sees massive, fatal incompetence. He sees a kingdom completely run on nepotism and unchecked emotions.
Oh, I see where this is going.
He looks at generals like Zhang Fei, who constantly gets drunk, abuses his own men, breaks the military rules, and loses crucial battles. But Zhang Fei never gets fired or executed because he is technically sworn brothers with the king, Liu Bei.
Ah, so Mr. M looks at Shu, and he sees a deeply toxic, high-context culture. A place where the prevailing attitude is, hey, we're all family here, so it's totally fine if you chronically mess up and cost lives.
Exactly. He looks at his current frustrating workplace, and he sees a modern-day corrupt Shu kingdom. He sees an office full of so-called nice people who simply refuse to take real responsibility for their failures. He sees managers constantly getting promoted just because they are well-liked by the executives, not because they are actually capable of doing the work. And to a guy deeply scarred by sudden bankruptcy trauma, that kind of environment isn't just annoying, it is existentially terrifying. Nice gets you killed in the real world. Nice makes the company go bankrupt.
So who does he actually prefer? If he hates the heroes, does he root for the villains? The Wei Kingdom? Does he look up to Cao Cao?
He absolutely loves the Wei Kingdom because Cao Cao, for all his historical ruthlessness, was a pure meritocrat. Cao Cao has that incredibly famous historical decree where he basically states, I do not care if you stole your own sister-in-law's gold. I do not care if society thinks you have a terrible, immoral reputation. If you have tangible talent, I will use you.
If you're capable, you are used. It's totally transactional, but it's honest.
Mr. M resonates with that philosophy on a molecular level. It is cold, it is utterly ruthless, but above all else, it is fair. In the Wei Kingdom, actual results matter far more than easily bruised feelings. Mr. M is basically standing in his office internally screaming, I want to work for a highly competent villain who actually knows how to run a country, rather than a benevolent hero who is going to accidentally drive us all right off a cliff.
That is such a powerful, illuminating reframing of his entire character. When you look at it through the lens of Wei versus Shu, his workplace anger feels way less like a petty temper tantrum and much more like a deeply held philosophical stance. He isn't just mad. He is actively fighting a daily war for meritocracy.
He views himself as the last capable general of the Wei army, tragically trapped behind enemy lines in a completely incompetent Shu company.
But then, and this is where the dossier gets incredibly wild, we leave the office, the clock strikes 5, we go home with him. And the movie we're watching completely changes genres. We go straight from a tense, bloody war epic to a genuinely heartwarming family drama.
Segment 4, the private life. This is the gap. This is where the sheer complexity of this man really, truly shines.
Let's talk about the Pharaoh.
The Pharaoh, yes. He literally refers to his wife as Pharaoh.
Which heavily implies she is an absolute, unquestioned monarch who builds giant pyramids and commands total, unthinking obedience from her subjects.
And the beautiful part is he absolutely loves it. At work, he is this roaring lion. At home, he completely submits to her. He turns into a house cat. He takes all the extra earnings he makes from his various side jobs and volunteer work, and he just hands it all directly over to her. The notes describe him as a devoted lovebird. But the specific detail that really got me, the one that honestly makes me want to reach through the paper and give this terrifying man a hug, is the bento box.
Please tell the listeners about the bento box.
Every single day before he leaves for his miserable corporate battlefield, his wife makes him a handmade bento box for lunch. And every single day when he sits down at his desk to eat it, he does so with what the Shadow Observer specifically describes as deep, profound gratitude. He has a quote in the file. He says, seeing this bento makes me think, I will do my best today. I never, ever take it for granted.
Wait, I need to confirm this from the notes. Does he actually cry over his lunch?
The Observer noted tears of gratitude. Now, whether he is literally, physically sobbing at his desk in the middle of the office or just internally profoundly moved to the point of misty eyes, the raw emotion is completely genuine.
This paints such a radically different, almost jarring picture of him. I mean, at 10 a.m., he's ruthlessly telling a senior manager, you aren't needed here, you should die. But at noon, he's looking at a little box of rice, rolled eggs, and pickles, and he is feeling completely overwhelmed by the power of human love.
It really strongly suggests that his extreme aggression at work is actually a shield. He is fighting so incredibly hard at the office, specifically to protect the peaceful sanctuary he has built at home. The workplace is just the grim battlefield where he has to slay monsters solely so he can bring the spoils of peace back to his pharaoh.
It's important to note he's not just a hermit who hides in his house with his wife either. He's a highly active community leader.
This detail totally blew my mind when I read it. Outside of work, he was elected the town council president, not just once, but 3 separate times, all while he was still in his 30s.
Which, if you know anything about Japanese local politics, is basically unheard of. That role is almost exclusively reserved for retired men in their late 60s or 70s who have decades of free time. For a guy in his 30s working a demanding corporate job, to take that on 3 times shows a staggering, almost unbelievable drive to serve his community. So the narrative that he just hates people is totally false. He can deal with people beautifully. He's clearly not socially inept.
He is actually incredibly charismatic, but only when he genuinely respects the people he is serving. Currently, he spends his weekends working as a volunteer local tourism guide. He casually mentions in the notes that he cannot walk down the main street of his town to run a 5-minute errand without it taking 30 minutes, simply because everyone stops him to chat. People are constantly yelling out, "Hey, brother," or "M-San, how are the wife and kids?"
This is such a staggering contrast to the corporate office where everyone is walking on eggshells, utterly terrified of setting him off.
It tells us something very profound about his personal growth. He has successfully separated his internal self-worth from his corporate job title. He's actively practicing the traditional merchant concept of sanpodoshi, or three-way satisfaction, but he's doing it by executing a total shift of his mental residence.
Moving his mental residence. Unpack that for us.
Physically, his body goes to the company headquarters every day to endure the misery and earn his salary. But his soul, his actual mental residence, lives entirely in his local town. Inside the company, he is labeled a destroyer. He is a total failure in terms of the traditional promotion track. But out in the town, he is viewed as a wise sage, an elder, a true community leader. He has realized that the corporate ladder is a rigged, hollow scam, so he just completely stopped climbing it. Instead, he built his own totally separate ladder out in the community.
That is his ultimate exit strategy. He isn't secretly scheming to become the CEO and fix the company from the top down. He's just biding his time, planning to eventually retire into his true identity as the beloved town sage.
Exactly. He is meticulously building a parallel kingdom where his core values, genuine connection, public service, and actual competence are actively celebrated instead of punished.
I do want to dig a little bit deeper into how he interacts with individuals on a one-on-one basis, though.
Yeah.
Because we've seen General M on the battlefield, and we've seen Husband M at home. But what is it actually like to be mentored by a guy like this? Segment 5 of the dossier details this concept he has called the sashimi theory of passion.
This is probably one of the most brilliant, cutthroat metaphors for resource allocation I have ever heard.
Right.
Okay, imagine you have a piece of the absolute highest quality, fresh-caught, premium fish, true sashimi grade.
Sounds delicious.
Right. Now, would you take that incredible, expensive cut of fish and give it to a terrible cook who is just going to toss it into a dirty microwave, or boil it until it's rubber in a bland soup?
Of course not. That is a total waste of premium ingredients. You give that cook the cheap frozen fish sticks?
Exactly. To Mr. M, his accumulated knowledge, his valuable time, and his intense mentorship, those are the premium sashimi. He is constantly scanning the younger employees in the office, looking for heat.
Heat meaning genuine passion.
Yes. If he senses that a young employee has real heat, if they are eager, if they ask why things work the way they do, if they genuinely care about improving, he serves them the sashimi. He will sit down and passionately teach them absolutely everything he knows.
And what if they are totally indifferent? What if they're the kind of employee who just sighs and asks, is all this really necessary? The people just there to quietly punch the clock?
They get absolutely nothing. Zero. He won't even waste his energy getting angry at them. He just totally ignores their existence because to him, teaching someone who lacks heat would be the equivalent of casting pearls before swine. It's microwaving the sashimi.
But despite that harsh filter, he does actually have a very specific soft spot. The file calls it the 1-year beginner rule.
This is the righteous kendo captain from his high school days coming out to play again. He operates on a very strict self-imposed rule. For the first entire year you are at the company, you are officially a beginner, and therefore I will never get angry at you.
Which is surprisingly deeply reasonable for a guy known as the Destroyer.
It is a deliberate grace period. He fundamentally acknowledges that new kids simply don't know the corporate moves yet. They haven't been trained. So he actively protects them from his own wrath and from the toxic culture. But, and here is the crucial twist that brings us back to his core trauma, he absolutely despises the concept of overprotecting them.
Right, the notes say he vehemently hates something he calls cat coddling.
Yes, cat coddling. He has this chilling quote where he states, "It is a literal sin to pamper young employees so much that they become completely useless when they eventually have to go to another company."
A sin. He uses that heavy moral language again.
Because you have to think back to his sudden bankruptcy trauma in his 20s. He deeply, fundamentally believes that the corporate world is a highly dangerous, totally unstable place. If you coddle a young employee, if you pat them on the head and tell them good job when they actually did a terrible job, you are actively making them weak. You are sending them out onto a lethal battlefield without a sword or a shield.
So his intense harshness towards them after that first year it's actually a twisted form of love.
In his own mind, Absolutely, yes. He is aggressively toughening them up so they can survive the inevitable day when their current company finally goes bust. He desperately wants them to be capable of surviving in the wild, especially with the looming threat of the AI era replacing average workers. It is exactly the biological behavior of a mother lion sharply biting her own cubs. It hurts them in the moment, but it is the only way to prepare them for the harsh reality of the savannah.
And it really seems like he connects deeply with people who can actually see past the biting and understand his underlying logic. There's a fascinating metanote in the file about the shadow observer themselves, the person who compiled all this data. Who exactly is this person to him?
The shadow observer is the internal source of all these quotes and observations. And what's truly fascinating is that Mr. M is fully aware he's being observed and analyzed. He actively opens up to this specific person.
But why? If he's such an isolated, masterless samurai who hates office politics, why voluntarily talk to this observer and let them psychoanalyze him?
Because he views the observer as fundamentally harmless in the best possible way. They act as a neutral sounding board. You have to remember, Mr. M is incredibly, profoundly lonely at work. Being the only truly sane, logical person in what you view as an insane, corrupt company is a highly isolating existence. The observer simply provides a totally safe, quiet space where Mr. M can verbally vent his intense logic without being judged or told to just be nicer. It really highlights that even the fiercest destroyer desperately needs to feel heard and understood by someone.
And he clearly values that human connection above all the cold logic he preaches. We see the ultimate proof of that in the phone bow.
Oh, the phone bow. This might be my absolute favorite physical detail in the entire character study. When Mr. M is sitting alone at his desk, and he's on the telephone asking a client or a contact for a favor, he physically bows. Deeply.
Even though there is no video, the person on the other end of the line cannot possibly see him bowing.
Exactly. When asked why he does it, he replies, "If you don't physically act like they are right there in front of you, the true feeling of respect won't convey through the wire."
That is deeply, almost surprisingly spiritual for a guy who loves spreadsheets and automation.
It totally contradicts the superficial idea that he is just some unfeeling logic robot. He doubly believes in chi, in the power of intent and energy. He genuinely believes that physical respect travels invisibly through the telephone wire. For all his intense talk about VBA automation, system purges, and pure efficiency, he fundamentally knows that human connection is the bedrock of everything. The file explicitly says his ultimate conclusion is, the last thing is people.
He even, quote, ugly cried over a former boss once.
Yes, a former department head who took the time to truly understand him and personally stuck his neck out to help Mr. M transition from a precarious contract worker to a stable, regular employee. Mr. M felt this massive, overwhelming debt of gratitude towards him. It's the traditional Japanese concepts of oningiri, profound debt and duty. When that specific boss eventually retired or transferred out, Mr. M completely broke down and wept openly. It beautifully proves that his heart isn't actually dead or frozen. It is just fiercely guarded behind 10 thick layers of hardened steel armor. But if you are genuine enough to get past that steel,
you get a level of intense, unshakable loyalty that most companies would kill for.
Exactly.
So where does this epic story actually lead? We are moving into segment 6 now, looking into the future. What is the final end game for a complex man like Mr. M? The dossier talks about a concept he calls the 101st point.
This is his core, underlying philosophy of human value in a mechanized world. He argues that scoring 100 points on a task is merely the standard. If you perfectly execute your job description without any errors, you get 100 points.
And for him, getting 100 points just isn't enough.
No, because 100 points is exactly what a well-programmed robot or a piece of AI software can do. 100 points is strictly what your salary pays for. There is zero true personal freedom or humanity in just hitting 100 points. He argues that the 101st point is the only place where true humanity actually exists.
Give me a tangible example of what that looks like in his daily life.
Well, the notes mention he spends his own time meticulously building physical cardboard mock-ups to explain complex IT workflows to his less technical colleagues. He absolutely doesn't have to do this. It is nowhere in his official job description. It takes extra time. But he builds these elaborate physical props simply to add that tiny, unrequested spark of extra value and clarity, that totally unnecessary, deeply human extra effort that is the 101st point.
It's almost like a quiet act of artistic rebellion against the corporate machine.
That is exactly what it is. In a rigid system that desperately wants you to be nothing more than a silent, predictable cog, doing something weird, creative, and totally unnecessary is a radical declaration of independence. It is his physical way of constantly screaming, I am a living, breathing human being with a soul, not just a line item on an HR spreadsheet.
And his ultimate goal in all of this, it isn't to finally get that promotion to executive. His eyes are totally fixed on something he calls the funeral evaluation.
The funeral evaluation, yes. He has completely stopped caring about what his quarterly performance review from management says. He is entirely focused on his final, ultimate review at the end of his life. He regularly asks himself one clarifying question. How many people will truly, genuinely mourn me when I die?
That is incredibly heavy. But it instantly clarifies every single confusing thing he does.
Right. If he spent his life ruthlessly chasing the CEO title by kissing up and playing Sentaku, maybe 5 corporate executives show up to his funeral out of sheer obligation, and they just spend the whole service checking their Rolexes. But if he completely ignores the corporate game, if he fully commits to being the town sage, if he is the passionate mentor who generously gave the premium sashimi to the young kids, if he remains the intensely devoted husband to his pharaoh.
The church is going to be packed to the rafters.
Yeah.
Standing room only.
Exactly. He is playing the absolute longest game imaginable.
He has completely accepted his tragic role within the company. He literally calls himself a shadow ruler or a guardian. He knows he is never going to be allowed to be the king of this particular castle.
He is totally fine with that. He knows he's the guy toiling away in the dark, sweaty basement, furiously keeping the boiler running and patching the leaking pipes. Also, the oblivious king upstairs can keep throwing his lavish parties. He fixes things from the darkness. He protects the weak from the shadows.
He's basically the corporate Dark Knight.
He really, truly is. He is the harsh, unforgiving hero that his failing company desperately needs, but he is absolutely not the compliant, polite hero they want or deserve. And he has made total peace with that injustice, because as we saw earlier, he is already mentally packing up his desk. He is actively preparing to permanently leave that toxic corporate battlefield behind and fully, entirely inhabit his true, joyful role as the beloved town sage.
So as we finally wrap up this incredibly deep dive into the dossier, how do we fundamentally summarize Mr. M? Is he the terrifying monster his colleagues think he is? Is he a misunderstood saint? A madman tilting at windmills?
I think he is, at his core, a berserker who fights viciously for cold efficiency, precisely because he has such a massive, burning love for human life.
Wow.
That is the beautiful, beating heart of the core contradiction. He violently hates wasted time because time is literally the fabric of life. He violently hates incompetence because he knows from his own traumatic past that unchecked incompetence directly causes mass human suffering.
He's a monster, but only to those who fundamentally lack sincerity.
Yeah. Exactly right. If you are lazy, if you are fake, if you are just coasting by reading the air, he is your absolute worst nightmare made flesh. But if you are genuinely sincere, if you have heat, if you are truly trying your best despite your flaws, he is the greatest, most fiercely loyal guardian you could ever possibly hope to have in your corner.
It really forces you to take a hard, uncomfortable look in the mirror, doesn't it? In our own workplaces, in our own lives, are we passively contributing to a corrupt shoe kingdom, prioritizing just being nice, being comfortable, and not rocking the boat? Or do we have a little bit of that ruthless Woy Kingdom energy inside of us? Are we actually willing to endure being hated, to be the bad guy in the room, just to make sure the right thing gets done?
Mr. M leaves us with a stark, uncompromising warning. He says, if you do not actively prepare for the coming storm, you are deeply guilty of negligence. We are all currently sailing on various ships that could absolutely sink tomorrow. The AI revolution, economic shifts, whatever it is. The question is, are you down in the dark engine room frantically fixing the leaks like Mr. M, or are you just up on the sunny deck trying to make superficial friends while the boat takes on water?
That is a deeply provocative thought that is going to stick with me for a very long time. Huge, massive thanks to the anonymous Shadow Observer for compiling and sharing this incredibly rich dossier with us. It is incredibly rare that we get to see this far inside a mind this brilliantly complex.
It's an incredible document, and honestly, it serves as a powerful reminder that every single difficult, abrasive person in your office probably has a massive, complex origin story you know nothing about. Maybe they aren't just being mean for the fun of it. Maybe, just maybe, they're the only person in the entire room who actually sees the iceberg coming.
Keep looking deeper, everyone. Try to find the 101st point in your own work today. And maybe Just maybe try bowing to the phone once in a while. Just see how it changes your energy. Thanks so much for listening.
See you next time.